Hello and welcome to the On the Apex analysis of the 2026 Monaco Grand Prix. The way that this is going to work is I'm going to go from the bottom in the constructor standings to the top, looking at every team's performance and basically what happened to them during the race. Starting off with the team who are currently 11th in the standings, Cadillac. Obviously quite an unfortunate weekend for them. They came very close to getting their first point in the sport, but Perez's penalty meant that they didn't get that. But we'll start by looking at Bottas's side of the race. Cadillac have been having issues throughout most of the Monaco Grand Prix, with the drivers reporting issues with the brakes in the free practice sessions, so I wasn't too surprised to see that Bottas ended up DNFing because of overheating issues. I just think that maybe elements of the car weren't suited to Monaco, which is why he had to retire from the race. Looking at Perez's side of the race, obviously he came so close to getting that first point for Cadillac in F1, but it just wasn't meant to be, with the two penalties for being out of position. The first one came because he drove into what would have been Gabriele Bortoletto's spot on the grid, but as Gabriele Bortoletto was starting from the pit lane, his spot should have remained empty, but Perez drove into it, which obviously you're not meant to do, which resulted in the penalty. The second one came after the red flag restart. His front right tyre was out of the box, which obviously you need all four wheels and the whole car in the box, and he wasn't, so it resulted in a penalty because of that, which meant that Cadillac hasn't got their first point in F1, which is a shame. I did think if Cadillac were going to be lucky enough to get a point this season, it probably would be a race like Monaco, where grid position is key, and if you get lucky with qualifying or people retiring from the race, you can get a point even if your car isn't the best, but it wasn't meant to be with Cadillac this weekend. But maybe throughout the rest of the season we'll see them bring in developments and there might be a chance for them to upgrade the car, but for now they sit 11th in the championship with no points. Moving on to the team whoever did get the point, Aston Martin. Very mixed weekend for them. Lance Stroll was running in the race. He did receive a 5-second penalty for exceeding track limits. Unlike everyone else who was speeding in the pit lane, his was for track limits. And then obviously he went into the barrier at the final sector. A lot of people thought that it was because of the fact that the track was breaking up, but Lance in an interview did say that it was because of the car's brakes. He sort of looked at the track and still said, yeah, the car's brakes just weren't working, that's why I crashed. So moving on to Fernando Alonso's side of the race, he did have quite the race, going from P21 to P10. Obviously, I do think it was just a kind of matter of getting lucky with retirements and in this case penalties. Otherwise, I don't necessarily know whether or not this would have been a race where Aston Martin scored, but they did. They've got a point on the board, they're in P10. I think it's not necessarily saying that this is a step in the right direction and that Aston Martin, everything's up from here. I do think this was kind of a stroke of luck, but it's a positive start. They've got a point. Whether or not they can build from that, I'd like to see it happen, because obviously I think everyone wants to see Aston Martin back in form, especially with Adrian Newey running the team now. You know, everyone kind of went into this season expecting a lot more from them than they've been able to give, so at least this is a positive point in the season. Moving on to Aldi, who currently sit P9 in the championship. Obviously not the greatest weekend for Gabriele Bortoletto, crashing out in qualifying and then having to start from the pit lane. He was sort of at a disadvantage. I do think he did a good job though to be able to get up to P11, really utilising with the penalties and retirements during the race. Obviously just unfortunate that he was one position out of the points. Hulkenberg was having a fairly uneventful race until after the red flag restart, in which he, on the hairpin, clipped Carlos Sainz's car, which then resulted in a 10-second penalty for causing a collision, which then meant he was dropped down to P14. Shifting the focus just onto Williams, the team was having quite a successful race with both cars running in the points. They then, however, decided to switch Albon and Sainz's positions, which then left Albon vulnerable to Lindblad, who did go on to overtake him. However, after the red flag restart, both cars were still running in the points, but Hulkenberg, as I said, clipped Sainz, and then Sainz did also go on to get clipped by Colapinto as well, which led him to retire the car, leaving him without points. Albon did still finish 8th though, so the team did at least have some success and did manage to retain some of the points. Moving on to Haas, Behrman had quite an unfortunate race, picking up damage on the first lap, which meant that he came in to change his wing. He did end up retiring during the race, and I couldn't find any published issue as to why they did this, so I'm assuming it was most likely just to preserve the engine as he was running in last, so there was no real reason to keep him in the race. Esteban Ocon was held up in the pack for the majority of the race. He wasn't really able to make any ground, but thanks to Hülkenberg and Russell's penalties, he was still able to finish 9th and pick up 2 points for the team. Looking at Racing Bulls, the team actually had a really good finish this race, with them obtaining P5 and 6. Liam Lawson actually didn't think he was going to be racing, as in the morning he said his car was in a million pieces, so props to the Racing Bull team for being able to get him out there and racing, and they were certainly rewarded with it for a great result. Lindblad actually had a really good strategy during the race, holding off pitting until the red flag when he was able to change his tyres, which meant that he was able to obtain track position and not have to do the mandatory pit stop in the race. And he was also able to complete a great overtake against Alex Albon on track. Moving on to Alpine, I'll start with Colapinto as he had the less chaotic race of the two. He was stuck in the pack for most of the race and did only manage to finish P15, and he was also given a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane. Pierre Gasly obviously had a very unfortunate race for him. He did a great overtake on Lando Norris on lap 1 and then fought him off for most of the race until he retired. Then he went on to get 2 5-second penalties for speeding in the pit lane for separate incidents, which meant that he lost out on his 3rd place finish and was dropped down to P7. Alpine have put out a statement saying that they have put in for a right of review for the FIA with the penalties, but I personally don't see them being overturned, so I do think, unfortunately, Pierre will be stuck with the P7 finish, but nevertheless, an incredible performance from him. I think he really showed his skill, and I just think it's unfortunate that he doesn't have the position to show for it. Moving on to Red Bull, obviously quite a mixed result for the team this weekend. Max Verstappen had to DNF after he did not have full throttle of his car, which was quite a shame because I think everyone was looking forward to him fighting against Kimi Antonelli and Lewis Hamilton. Isaac Hadjar, however, had quite a successful weekend, holding off George Russell for most of the race. He was told he had engine braking issues, which props to him. He managed brilliantly throughout the race and still went on to get a podium despite having issues. Moving on to McLaren, I honestly did think that there was going to be some kind of contact between their cars just coming out of Zandvoort because they got very close, but I think really all the consequences that they suffered was just that Lando Norris got overtaken by Pierre Gasly, which he then spent part of the race trying to chase after him, but then had to retire because of power unit issues. I do think that this is concerning, considering that Lando DNF'd from free practice 2 due to an electrical issue, and then obviously also retired in Canada. Whether or not this is a broader issue, it's definitely hindering McLaren's opportunities to fight for the championships. On Oscar Piastri's side of things, he had a fairly uneventful race. He was given a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane, but still managed to finish in P4. So overall, not a bad result for him. He did still pick up points, but just unfortunate that the team couldn't have had a double points finish. Much like Red Bull, Ferrari had quite a mixed result this weekend. Charles Leclerc was running in 3rd for most of the race, but he crashed in the last sector in the same place as Stroll, and much like Stroll, he blamed the brakes on the car, not necessarily the fact that the track was breaking up. Lewis Hamilton held 2nd for the race. He did get a 5-second penalty, but it didn't result much as the gap between him and the car behind was too large. I did think that when it was announced that there was going to be a standing start after the red flag, that there was a chance for him to potentially overtake Kimi Antonelli, but obviously Antonelli nailed the start and Hamilton was unable to get past him and settled for 2nd. Moving on to Mercedes, another unfortunate weekend for George Russell. He qualified in 6th and then spent most of the race stuck behind Isaac Hadjar and his engine issue. He did go on to receive a 5-second penalty for speeding in the pit lane and a second one for not serving the first penalty properly. He did go on to finish in P13, which meant that he didn't pick up any points. Kimi Antonelli completed his first career Grand Slam, which for anyone who doesn't know is when you get pole position, fastest lap and lead every lap in the race. I'm not surprised, he absolutely stormed ahead from the start, just absolutely dominating and moving away from the field. He makes it 5 race wins in a row. And that is it for the Apex analysis. I will see you next week for the first Spanish Grand Prix of the season in Barcelona.